Alright, so with week 17 of the 2024 NFL season in the books, I think it is a good time to take a look back, see how we got here, see who did well, who did poorly in week 17, and take just a general inventory as to where we stand going into week 18 and the playoffs. So kicking things off here with the recap, we have the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh by a final score of 29-10 on Christmas Day. Kansas City in this game, ultimately, they were super effective. They had trouble a little bit in the second quarter. The Steelers had a little bit of life. They really played decently in the second quarter, but ultimately Kansas City just did whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, except for that second quarter. They owned the Steelers defense. They went on long, methodical drives, and they really choked out the Steelers offense from having any opportunity because they owned their defense. Meanwhile, looking at the Steelers, the offensive line did struggle. The Steelers did have a couple of drives that went sideways, partially due to that offensive line, but ultimately, this team just really didn't look great. In the second and third quarter, the offense had a little bit of life, but once again, the defense they sold. The defense sold the game horribly and basically handed the game over to the Chiefs and likely handed the division over to the Baltimore Ravens. The worst part about it was the Steelers just gave up. They were down. There was it would have been a prayer to come back like the Vikings game was this week, but the Steelers didn't even try. They just punted on opportunities. They didn't really do anything late to show they were trying to fight for this game either. Moving on now, we have the Baltimore Ravens absolutely whooping the Houston Texans. Final score was 31-2 here in Houston. Yes, you heard that, 31-2. Houston only managing to get a safety on Baltimore early. So CJ Stroud just really didn't look the way we have expected him going into this year. He's really been having a sophomore slump. He has been the definition of a sophomore slump. Whether that is from the fact of his receivers going down at multiple different points, especially I think that Tank Dell injury late in that game hurt him pretty good. It was a brutal end to that game, and really CJ just didn't look great, and the team didn't really have any defense on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, Baltimore, they just did whatever they wanted. Once again, they have been getting hot at the right time. This team is the definition of getting hot at the right time. And at this point, all they got to do is win, and they win the AFC North. Even if they lose, the Steelers got to lose, and Steelers have not been looking great, so I think the Ravens really have a great shot at winning this division, unfortunately. So they are really looking decent. Now moving on to mayhaps the worst game of the week, the Thursday night game, the Thursday night football finale between the Seattle Seahawks and the Chicago Bears. This game ending in a Seahawks victory of a final score of a whopping high-scoring 6-3 game. And just taking a look at this game, really this told us a lot about Chicago as a team. They had many opportunities. Seattle was just giving them opportunities, and their clock management skills, even without Eberflus, have sucked. This team just cannot manage a clock to save their lives, and it has bit them on a number of occasions. And the other thing I have for Chicago, you gotta protect Caleb Williams. We've seen flashes. Like there was a fourth quarter play where it was a large fourth down, and Caleb Williams is under duress. He's dancing. He's under pressure. He just sidearm hucks it to his receiver. Pinpoint beautiful pass on the run for the first down. But you can't rely on those types of plays. That happens more often than not. Caleb's getting sacked. You gotta protect Caleb Williams and let him make those splash plays that we know he can make. Meanwhile, looking at Seattle, they gotta win, but really you needed to look good. Seattle needed to look good, they needed to look dominant. They won this game, yes, but now they're going to be limping. I still see them as a limping team going into this Week 18 match against the Rams, and surprise, surprise, spoiler alert, they got eliminated, even with that win. Alright, moving on to Saturday's slate of games, we will start off with the Los Angeles Chargers absolutely walloping the New England Patriots in the last year, and let's just call a spade here. Gerard Mayo, I would want to see what he can do with a better roster, but that guy has no energy on the sidelines. Yeah, you're down big and a horrible call goes the other way, but you don't even fight for it. Any coach would have fought for horrible calls even if they're down 100-0 with 2 seconds left, because you gotta show that fight. You gotta show that your team that you are going to fight for them no matter the situation, because otherwise they might not fight for you. So that's what we really saw in the field there. The Patriots just trying to do what they can, but they just didn't really protect Drake at all, and the defense just couldn't get to Justin Herbert. The pass rush flat out sucked. It was a horrible game for New England, and I guess maybe it gives them a higher draft pick, but everyone's talking about now they're going to get Shador after what happened this week. You don't need Shador. You got a good quarterback. Drake May will be a solid quarterback. He'll be, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback in the league at some point. if you develop him right and give him the weapons and help he needs. Meanwhile, looking at the Chargers, they were absolutely dominant. They knew what this assignment was. Go into New England, get the win, and you are in the playoffs. Nothing held back, no holds barred. You're in. And they did it. They grabbed that game by the you-know-what and just absolutely wrecked. All right, up next we have mayhaps one of the best games of the week. I would say the best, but this week had some incredible finishes. So this game may only be one of the best of this week. The Denver Broncos just barely falling and failing to clinch a playoff berth against the Cincinnati Bengals by a final score of 30-24 in overtime. And man, the Cincinnati defense, they played all right in the first half. The offense was very slow to start, but the defense almost sold it at the end. Let's be real here. Cincinnati had the lead. They let Bo Nix go down and get what he needed to do. And then to top it all off, your kicker tried to sell the game when all you had to do was kick a field goal and he doinks it right off the post. You basically gave the game to Denver. You basically said, Denver, please take this playoff spot. We don't want it. We don't want to fight for our playoff lives. And if a team is going to play like that, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. Now, they're going to be hungry against Pittsburgh, but at the same time, this team, if they play like this against Pittsburgh, they are not going to win. Even with that Steelers defense and with that Steelers offense that has struggled, the Steelers will still beat that Bengals team they trotted out last Sunday against the Broncos. Or Saturday, I should say. Meanwhile, Denver, they had a slow start, but they got it going. They had a strong third quarter, but Bo Nix in clutch didn't really do the job that he needed to do. He had multiple opportunities to go out and win the game. Even a tie would have clinched the playoffs for them, but he couldn't do it. 3rd down and 9, all you had to do was get the first down and you basically win the game. And what do? You fail to do anything with it and you have to punt it away to Cincinnati to basically win them the game. So really, Denver, Bo Nix, he can be a good quarterback when he wants to be. He's got to get more consistent and more reliable for this team to really be a threat moving forward. All right, going now to the Saturday night cap, the Arizona Cardinals falling to the Los Angeles Rams 13-9. And man, this game had a lot riding on it. Arizona, while they were eliminated last week, could have played spoiler to the Los Angeles Rams making the playoffs and instead putting in the Seattle Seahawks. But unfortunately, that really didn't work out for Arizona. They just couldn't run it up the gut in the first half, and that's where their strength lies. If Arizona can run it up the gut and they can run the ball on you, they then force the defense to have to respect the run so that Kyler Murray can air it out on a West Coast offense. And really, if you can't get it going up the gut, that's why they struggled in the first half. They would run it up the gut for 1, 2, 2, 1, 3. They couldn't get more than a few yards, not even a handful of yards each play. Eventually, when they got it going in the second half, they looked solid. But once again, their soft defense just blew it. Their soft defense gave up those chunk plays to LA. Speaking of LA, they got just enough of those big splash plays. This team relies on the splash play. If they cannot get the splash play, they can't win the game. We saw it against Buffalo. They got the splash play a number of times against Buffalo, gave up a lot of splash plays, but they got a lot of them themselves to win them the game. The other concern I have for the Rams is consistency. This team will play like a Super Bowl contender one week, like when they played the Bills, and then they'll go and barely sneak past the San Francisco 49ers, only putting up field goals. And then they'll drop a 13-9 game like this against Arizona. You can't be a Super Bowl contender with that inconsistency. Can this team do it? Does the team have the potential to do it? We've seen the flashes, but can they string 4 games together? Because you're playing Wild Card Weekend, so you got to win Wild Card, Divisional, Conference Championship, and Super Bowl. And I don't think this team can string those 4 good games together back-to-back weeks. I just don't think they can. All right, now we got the Sunday slate of games, and oh boy, let's go ahead and start with probably one of the worst games. If you're a Bills fan, the best game, but other than that, it was just a blowout after the Bills got going. The Buffalo Bills beating the New York Jets at home 40-14. The Bills, they were scaring me a little bit, not going to lie. As cheering for the Rams to make the playoffs, we needed the Bills to win and the Vikings to win. That was the easiest path forward, and then, the Sunday night game to go right. It was a close one, but ultimately, Buffalo, they struggled in the first half. They were up 12-0 at one point. That's it. This team should have been way ahead, but ultimately they eventually managed to break free and just absolutely not look back. They were up 40-0, and then the Jets had Aaron Rodgers get benched. Granted, Aaron Rodgers did kind of instigate it by saying, hey, 40-0, at some point you're going to go to Tyrod, aren't you? And you know what? They did. Jeff Albrecht made that move, and the Jets looked better. It looked like they had life under Tyrod Taylor. Now, how much of that was the Bills playing more, hey, we'll give you yardage, but, don't come back entirely on us. And how much was that with Tyrod Taylor being better than Aaron Rodgers? I couldn't tell you. But ultimately, the Jets defense did their job in the first half, but Aaron Rodgers failed to do anything to help. And if you're not going to get any help from your quarterback, you're going to be, demeaned, and you're going to struggle in the second half like they did against Buffalo there. All right, now we go on to the absolute tankiest of tank bowls, the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars winning this one in Duval, 20-13. And, it was a nice win for you, Jacksonville, really was. But you lost the war. You lost the war. The problem is, if you were going to win that game, you only wanted to win that game if you had a core. Neither of these teams had a core. Both of these teams basically should have been wanting losses. And they ultimately didn't get their wish. They won the game, and they don't have a core. So they got a worse draft pick with no core to build around. So, really, did you win the game, Jacksonville? Tennessee, you did what you needed. You don't really have much in quarterback. You have, Mason Rudolph, who's looking, meh. You got Will Levis, who's, meh. You don't have a quarterback. This team can potentially make a little bit of noise. They could be at least somewhat competitive. This roster has the potential, with a good quarterback, to be maybe an 8-win team, a 7-8 win team, not a 3-win team. But once again, you don't have a quarterback, so you're not winning those games. All right, moving on now to an absolute blowout. The Carolina Panthers having an awful game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, losing 14-48. I mean, oh my word, Tampa Bay knew what was on the line, and they grabbed it. This team knew that they had to win out, and they would win the division. The problem is, Carolina was trying to stand in their way, and Carolina was looking pretty damn good going into this week. They really, since Bryce Young was benched and came back from that benching, he has been a whole completely different quarterback. But speaking back on Tampa Bay, they knew it was on the line, and they went and grabbed it and dominated it. Shifting back over to Carolina, I mean, Bryce tried, but I can't really fault Carolina for this loss too much, because we knew a bad game was coming. Bryce has strung together 4 or 5 pretty solid games. Not winning them all, winning one of them, but he's put together quite a few good games. We knew a bad game should be coming at some point. It just happened to be here, and it looked absolutely awful. Ultimately, though, Carolina, I think that you are moving in the right direction. This team is finally starting to have a semblance of identity and a semblance of direction moving forward. All right, now moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the New Orleans Saints and winning 25-10. Once again, was this really a win for Vegas? Was this really a win? They won a meaningless game, but now their draft stock is even worse. They're going to be drafting higher. AOC looked good, which is, solid. You want your second-year quarterback to take that step. The problem is he really going to be the guy that takes you forward? He looked good, yes, but it was against the Saints. This team's defense has not been great. So ultimately, do you really go forward with AOC, or do you try to make a quarterback change via the draft? There's not really a lot of good quarterbacks in the draft, or even free agency. There's really not. Maybe you try to go out and sign a veteran like Russ. Maybe you go and try and sign Justin Fields if the Steelers don't re-sign him. But the question is, do you really want to go out and sign Justin Fields when you don't have a team to work around him? That's the problem there as well. What's the team? Brock Bowers, Max Crosby? You don't have anyone else. You let Josh Jacobs walk this season, and ultimately, you're paying the price. You don't have a team. Meanwhile, New Orleans, they have just been flat without Carr, and they have no offense, really. I mean, Rattler didn't look bad, but he didn't really look great either. And this was your chance. Vegas only has a pass rush. They don't have much of a secondary. This was your chance to air it out, lob the ball deep, look like the quarterback you were your first year of college. The Spencer Rattler, I remember at one point, was a really high-value quarterback, and then he just fell off a cliff. All right, before we rant about Spencer Rattler too much, let's go ahead and move on to the Dallas Cowboys absolutely getting hosed by the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's be real here. Let's call a spade a spade. Dallas's defense sucks. Philadelphia was on their second and then their third string quarterback in this one, and you had Kenny Pickett and this kid named McKee that nobody had ever heard of, and you lost 41-7. You let 41 points up to Kenny Pickett and a third stringer nobody in this planet has heard of. Dallas, look yourselves in the mirror and try and tell yourselves that you have a semblance of a defensive core after that. You don't. You suck. This team just has no pieces. They need it. If I'm Jerry Jones, I'm tearing it down. I'm going from the top down, tearing it down. McCarthy's gone. Coordinator's gone. Dak, try and offload him somewhere if you can. Cut anyone you can on the defense. Trade any pieces of value. Go into a complete rebuild and work on getting pieces. Even if you keep your team, if you keep your quarterback around, if you keep Dak around, maybe you keep him around as your transitional quarterback at this point and build a team around a new quarterback a la Bears. Build a team around your future quarterback and then draft your future quarterback. That's what the Bears did, and their team has potential. But Dallas needs to completely rebuild from the ground up, in my opinion. Meanwhile, Philadelphia just absolutely shooting up in the rankings after this week. You managed to win and hose a divisional opponent. Yes, they're on their backup quarterback, but you hosed them with your second and third string quarterback. Let's be real here, Philadelphia. You just absolutely dominated. I'm scared of you. If I'm in the NFC, if I'm in the AFC even, I'm scared of facing you in the Super Bowl. All right, moving on to another interesting game this week. The Indianapolis Colts falling to the New York Giants and being eliminated by the New York Giants 33-45. Man, Indy just blew it. Everyone needs to go there. This team just, they just need, all they need to do is beat a 2-13 team, and they would be alive this going into week 18. And they couldn't do it. The defense blew it. The offense looked somewhat flat. I mean, they finally got going late, but they were playing from behind just about the whole day. And you can't expect your team to be successful when you're playing from behind like that. So you really got to look to tear it all down. And I don't know what to do if I'm the Colts other than just restart like the Cowboys, Meanwhile, talking on to the Giants, all they had to do was lose, and they all but secure the top pick in the draft. And they couldn't even do that. They didn't even do that. But, bright spot, Drew Lock finally getting his chance in the sun to play, and he looked incredible. Drew Lock going out there and being the quarterback we knew he could have been with this team had they have went to him instead of Tommy DeVito. We might be talking about a different Giants team if Tommy DeVito wasn't the quarterback and you go to Drew Lock instead. But no, they started Tommy DeVito to continue the tank. All right, moving into the afternoon slate of games, there were only two. Let's go ahead and talk about the Dolphins and the Browns first, and then we'll get on to the game of the week. The Miami Dolphins beating the Browns 20-3. Miami was able to win and stay alive, but really, I'm not convinced about this team. I really am not. Yeah, they didn't have a couple of key players, but still, I don't know what to say. I mean, you did it without Tua, at least. You stayed alive. But if this team is going to keep playing like this going forward, they're going to get blown out if they even make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, they're going to be making it as a 7 seed. And you're going to have to go to Buffalo, and you're going to get walloped. If you play like this against Buffalo, you're going to get absolutely owned by a final score of like 52-4 or 52-7. It's going to look worse than the Philadelphia Cowboys game from this week. So Miami really needs to see how can we improve, how can we look to get better. Yeah, they did it without some of their key players, but still, this team needs to look at getting better and more consistent across the board. Meanwhile, Cleveland, you just folded for the tank. Let's be real here. Now you're looking at maybe Jerome Ford being out, definitely potentially for next week, and maybe even depending on how this goes. If he has to have ankle surgery on that high ankle, you might need to have him miss a couple weeks next year. I mean, hopefully he doesn't need surgery. Probably won't, but let's talk about it here. There's always a chance when you have something like that you're going to need to do something extraneous. And hopefully that's not the case, because we all know what happened to Nick Chubb after he came back from under the needle. He has not looked the same at all since coming back this season. All right, now moving on to the game of the week. The Green Bay Packers falling to the Minnesota Vikings, but almost coming back. Final score was 27-25. The Vikings chargered, whatever you want to call it, because they were dominant for the first 3 quarters. And then they just absolutely tried to choke it. They went into that prevent defense. They got too lax, too soft, and they let Green Bay walk right through that door until they eventually had to slam it shut on offense by getting a first down to ice the game after a Green Bay touchdown. Meanwhile, Green Bay looking really good, but it took until Minnesota softened up. If Minnesota doesn't soften up, you get blown out of the water and you struggle. But you managed to come back a little bit. I gotta give you credit for that. When they opened the door, you walked through it. You didn't just stand at the entrance of the door saying, "Hi, I'm here." You thought through it and you tried to get the win. Huge kudos to you for that. But once again, you gotta get a faster start. If you're gonna be playing teams like this, if you're Green Bay, you are hoping Washington slips up next week. Because now Washington controls the NFC seeding. They're not going to go into the 6, or they're not going to go into the 5 seed, so they control your destiny, Green Bay. You better hope that Washington loses against Dallas and you take care of business. Because otherwise, you're going to have to go to Philadelphia and you are going to struggle. Let's be real here. You're going to go to Philadelphia, you're going to struggle, and you're not going to do anything. So you better hope Washington screws up if you play like you did today. All right, now moving on to Sunday Night Football. This game potentially once again being the game of the week. We were treated to two incredible games back-to-back. The Atlanta Falcons falling to the Washington Commanders 30-24 in overtime. Once again, both overtime games this week going 30-24. But both Penix and Daniels, I don't really have a lot to say about either specific team here. Washington won to control their destiny. Atlanta lost, so they no longer control their destiny. They need to hope that Tampa screws up, because if Tampa wins, they get the division, if I'm not mistaken. But both Penix and Daniels looked incredible. They looked great. They had their rookie moments, as all rookies are going to do. But they looked really good apart from those rookie moments. And these two quarterbacks really have a bright future ahead. In looking at their teams, the teams around them, they really both have bright futures. My biggest concern for Atlanta is clock management. Atlanta almost screwed themselves in the foot because Raheem Morris didn't take a timeout. Atlanta gets a big chunk play for about 20 yards. The team gets ready, quickly lines up, and then they take another 10 seconds at the line trying to arrange things. You wasted 20 seconds of clock because of that. And thankfully you didn't end up needing it at the end, because ultimately you could have really been in a bad spot. But that 20 seconds could have made a difference. Granted, you had to punt the ball away anyway to Washington, I think it was at the end of the game. But still, your clock management, if your clock management is going to be like this, and you're going to hire like someone like Matt Eberflus with clock management, you're going to struggle in the future, not because of the talent, but because of the coaching. And moving on to the last game of Week 17, the Monday Night Football game between the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. The Lions winning this one in San Fran by a final score of 40-34. Man, Detroit playing from behind most of the game, but able to walk through the door at the very end. San Francisco, they played tough, but they collapsed in the fourth quarter. They started in the third, they fell apart completely in the fourth, and this team just struggled late. They opened the door for Detroit. Detroit walked right through and never looked back. They did what Green Bay couldn't do. Meanwhile, Detroit, I don't got much to say for you. You got a big win. You're still in control, or you're still trying to win for the 1 seed. You're in control of your own destiny, just like Minnesota. Win and get the 1 seed in the first round bye. But I'm more excited for this because Detroit set up the funny. They set up the massive funny. We're going to see a 14-win team. 14-win team be the 5 seed. When have we ever seen a 14-win team not have a home playoff game? Either Minnesota or Detroit is going to have to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs as a 14-win team. I've never seen it. It's kind of hilarious, and that's why I was wanting Detroit to win that game. San Fran's had a tough enough year as it is, in my opinion. But that's the funny thing for me. All right, speaking of the playoffs, let's go ahead and take a look at our playoff seeding. So for the AFC, we have the 1 seed, the 2 seed, and the 4 seed all set. The 1 seed is going to be Kansas City, the 2 seed is going to be Buffalo, and the 4 seed is going to be Houston. The 3 seed is most likely going to be Baltimore, but it could be Pittsburgh. If Baltimore loses, Pittsburgh wins. Pittsburgh does win the AFC North and gets the 3rd seed. And, if that does happen, Baltimore would fall to the 5 seed. But speaking of the 5 seed, if that's not the Ravens, it will be either the Chargers or the Steelers. And if Baltimore wins the division, then the Chargers and Steelers will be the 5th seed and 6th seed. Whoever wins, if the Steelers win, they control their destiny. If they win, they get the 5 seed. If they lose and the Chargers win, Chargers get the 5 seed. Other than that, Steelers get the 5 seed no matter what. And the 7th seed is most likely going to be Denver with a win, or it's Miami. And least likely of all is Cincinnati, because they need some help from Miami to lose and Denver to lose to get that 7th seed. Meanwhile, let's talk about the NFC. Things are a lot more set in stone over there. Taking a look at it on my whiteboard across the room, we have the 1 seed is going to be Detroit or Minnesota. The person who's not the 1 seed will be the 5 seed. The 2 seed will be Philadelphia. Let's see here. The 3 seed will be Tampa Bay or the Rams. The 4 seed will be either the Rams, Atlanta, or Tampa. Tampa, Atlanta, or the Rams. And the 6th seed will be Washington or Green Bay. The 7th seed will be the other team, with Washington controlling that destiny for both those teams, as a win secures the 6th seed for them. And the only way Green Bay has to the 6th seed is a win with a Washington loss. Alright, well, that's about going to do it for me today. If you guys did like, don't forget to smash like and subscribe, as it does help me out a whole lot. It tells me that I'm making content that y'all enjoy. And I guess make sure as well you do drop a subscribe because it does help us out a whole lot. Once again, same deal. We bring you coverage 3 days a week of videos. On top of that, we have streams of NFL coverage games throughout the week as we can. So, you know, sometimes David will be around too, so that's a nice little perk as well. But I guess with that, I gotta get going because I gotta edit this video and I gotta work on the power rankings video for this week, also coming out tomorrow as well. So I guess I'll see you guys later. Peace out and have a good one.